Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. You just heard the opening part of David Bryant's version of Sweet Hour of Prayer, a beautiful old hymn. Sweet hour of prayer that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief and oft escaped the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. And the sermon today is about prayer. It's also about fig trees and fig Newtons and all sorts of good stuff. So come and together this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're looking at this, let us worship together and offer our prayers and our praise to God. Today we will hear a little bit about gardening from Jesus in a parable that's found in Luke 13, verses 6 to 9. Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and I still find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears good fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down." My first awareness of a fig tree was definitely not of the sort that is described in Jesus' parable. It was not in the middle of vineyards. It was in Philadelphia. Sunday afternoons, we would go to spend with my grandmother at Simpson House, then the Methodist Home for the Aged. And to get there, we would drive through one of the Italian neighborhoods, uh, south of Overbrook and adjacent maybe to Wynwood. I don't even know what the neighborhood was called, but there would be row houses. And in front of many of them, you'd see this thing sticking up. In the summer, it was like a banana tree. It had big, huge leaves. They would flop all over the place. Not banana leaves, but kind of rounded a little bit. What did I know? I was looking from the back seat of the car. But the really part that always got my attention was when in late fall and through the winter, there would be these things there where the trees had been during the summer, where there were plants, and they just kind of stuck up. They were big, sort of spiky spikes of plastic wrap sticking up from the ground. Maybe there were blankets that were duct taped together, and those were fig trees. Sometimes somebody would put Christmas lights on them, and sometimes I always thought it was a joke. Later on, I found out that sometimes the Christmas lights would be there to help keep things warmer inside that wrapped up whatever it was through the winter. And those were fig trees. The other thing I knew about figs was that they had something to do with fig Newtons. You remember fig Newtons, right? They still make them. They're good. Uh, at the time, they were kind of a big deal because there were commercials on TV for fig Newtons, and it would have a man dressed up like a square cookie, and his face was sticking out from it, and he would sing, "Ooey gooey, rich and chewy inside, tender cakey, cold and cakey outside. You wrap the inside in the outside, and it's good. Darn tootin' doing the big fig Newton." Here's the tricky part: the big fig Newton. See, there was a dance that went with it. And at the end, he was standing on one foot, balancing. Corny as all get out. But boy, does it stick in your head. But back to the real thing. Because in Jesus' parable, he was talking about something that was a staple to people's diet. It was an important food crop. And it mattered that figs, like grapes or like any other fruit, produce. Otherwise, get them out of the way and get something in there that will feed people. Not too long ago, one of the women at church did a presentation for one of the study groups, the fellowship groups, and it was about the plants that are mentioned in the Bible. And among them were many. I borrowed one of her books that she'd used for research. It was called Planting Bible Garden by F. Nigel Hepper. Now, there's a great name, isn't it? And one of the entries in that book was one on Ficus caricus, the common fig. And what he said there brought together for me what Jesus said in his parable and what I'd seen in the front yards of dozens and dozens of row houses. It was the entry on Ficus caricus, the common fig. And it talked about how to care for fig trees. He said, cuttings of 2 to 3 year old twigs of the common fig usually root very easily in pots and grow well in ordinary soil mixed with lime rubble. If planted too close to the wall, the expanding trunk could cause damage. Beware also of the extensive roots which take nourishment from the surrounding soil. Let me repeat that line. Beware also of the extensive roots which take nourishment from the surrounding soil. By planting in a sunken tub, the roots will be restricted. In dry weather, water well, and during a very severe winter frost, protect the branches with mats or polyethylene sheets. In cold climates, plants grown in tubs need to be wintered inside. Now, that explains both those funny looking creations heated with Christmas lights and what was going on in Jesus' parable. Again, a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and I still find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, and I will dig round it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, cut it down." The fig tree in the parable had, as Hepper warned they could, used up the soil. And the entire tree and the man looking for the fruit were feeling the natural effects of a tree that was going uncared for. And the solution in a case like that isn't to get rid of the tree itself, but to refresh the soil around it, to tend to what was going into it, to care for the roots. And digging around it would loosen the soil so that the roots could spread farther around and reach more water and expand. But fertilizing the soil would replace what had gone into the plant and over time needed to be replenished. So here's the meaning of the parable, the application of it. Jesus was seeing, after 3 years of going around and reaching out to the people around him up and down the lengths of the country, just like the man had come 3 years looking for fruit on this fig tree. He had been going around for 3 years and wasn't seeing a lot of change in people, a lot of growth, a deeper spirituality, an increased closeness to God, greater love for God and neighbor. And he was frustrated and wondered whether it was time to just cut everything off. But someone close to the tree, his Father in heaven perhaps, said, "Give it time. Tend it carefully. Let's do more to give it what you've been giving it, but in a more intense way. Let's replenish once we can, now that we've spotted the problem. Let's replenish what may have been in the soil, but for some reason now is lacking." Back to the agricultural side of this. Fig trees need, as I found in a site online, fig trees need a balanced mix of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. A slow-release organic fertilizer applied in early spring and midsummer can keep them thriving. Compost and aged manure, as it said in the parable, also enrich the soil, giving your tree the nutrients it craves for strong roots and a better fruit production. So I could just say, hey, folks, you need to tend to your roots a little bit. Spend more time in prayer. But let's be more specific than just that. And I'll point out some of the agricultural techniques, some of the techniques of prayer that can help and lay close to hand when someone's spiritual life is feeling a little worn down, when their soul is feeling in need of more grace, more nutrients, when they sense that it's important, as it always is, maybe I should say more critical at some point, to put their roots down into a better place in the soil. So I want to suggest some practical means of prayer. Don't want to just say, go pray. Because even the disciples had said to Jesus, teach us how to pray. And that's when he gave us all the Lord's Prayer. When you pray, pray saying this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your name be kept holy, and so forth. Begin there. Take a good look at the Lord's Prayer. Read it through and take it slowly and make each phrase your own. But in addition, I want to give examples drawn from the hymnals that are in the racks in church, right in front of everybody. And let's look at a few of those. And if you don't have one of those at home, you're watching on a video, I'll put things up on the screen so you can see. And check out, perhaps if it helps, the site hymnary, hymnary.org, where you can find hymnals of all sorts of different denominations. But the ones that I will be quoting from are from the United Methodist hymnal, the most recent version, the 1988. So here we go. Look, for instance, at the Prayer of St. Francis in the hymnal number 481. The words are beautiful and heartfelt and good to learn. And there are singable settings of it that will help with that. If it helps you, look it up on YouTube and play it over and over. But go beyond that to look at what we can see in the prayer lives of others that lie behind the words on the page. Notice that this prayer comes from someone paying attention to the needs of other people and what's going on in the world around them. And how in doing that, he found himself blessed by God, and we may have the same experience. For some people, to pray and to serve are the same thing. What often drains our spirits, no matter where we fall on that, is concentrating only on ourselves. And here is something that turns our attention beyond ourselves. I'm not saying we don't also count, but between self and other, there has to be a healthy balance. And the other thing about Francis was that he expressed a very strong awareness of God's love that is shared through nature. We've all seen pictures of him preaching to the birds. Like Jesus, he paid attention to the flowers of the field, the birds of the air. There are times when our prayer can be strengthened by service to others, and times when our prayer is strengthened by just going outside and taking a long walk and paying attention to nature or the people around us. Or again, look at the next four entries in the hymnal. A prayer that goes back to the earliest days of the faith lies behind each of these entries, the same phrase, a phrase that is so early that it still shows up in the form that it had in New Testament Greek. Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison. In English, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. When you're upset or your mind is racing, try sitting down and thinking each phrase with an alternating breath, with like a one breath pause in between. Inhale, then exhale, Lord have mercy. Inhale again, exhale, Christ have mercy. Inhale, maybe thinking about receiving his mercy with each breath, kind of breathing it in. And then exhale, Lord have mercy. And repeat that over and over as long as you need. You could also use another phrase or Bible verse. Spoke here at number 488, for example, are the words of the repentant thief on the cross next to Jesus, who spoke to him and said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This is a chant that the Taizé community will often use. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. If you're praying for someone else or for some large or complicated situation, you could picture that person or people or place in your mind and say quietly or sing again, Jesus, remember them when you come into your kingdom. Or, Lord, have mercy. The point of these methods, and we are Methodists, the point of these methods is simply to help you clear your own mind in order to stop listening to yourself so much and be able to listen for God instead. Part of what it does is to calm you down. And in the calmness, God may send something to you, a Bible verse that pops up into your head. Maybe it's not the one that you've been concentrating on, might be a different one. A word that keeps coming, an image, something that sort of speaks to your heart, rings a bell, gives you a sense of God's presence. It might be a feeling, not even a word. It isn't always a good feeling. It might be something that points out an area that you yourself need to work on. We would use the word, it might convict you, not meaning sentence you to something, but put something on your heart that makes you aware of something or some way that you need to be paying attention. And when you do that, perhaps in a large scale, God may be saying he has something for you to do. Take a look at number 489, which is a prayer written by Howard Thurman. I feel a personal connection to this because he was dean of Marsh Chapel at Boston University before my time, but where when I was in college, I worshiped every Sunday and often during the week met with friends downstairs in a room under the sanctuary called the Thurman Room. Now, there's nothing wrong with reading somebody else's words in prayer if they reflect what is in your own heart. And if they don't, you can always change them as you go along. It's like sending somebody a greeting card. You don't draw the picture, you don't write the words, but you choose something that expresses what you want to say and add your own note over on the other side. Or there's always the option that shows up at number 494, which really comes in for a lot of criticism as being simplistic, pie-in-the-sky, fluffy, kind of amorphous, marshmallow sort of a thing. But Kumbaya, it lays out before God in simple terms what's going on. You don't need to use Kumbaya to do that. You can just say, God, I'm scared. God, I am upset. Lord, somebody around here is in pain. Lord, my best friend is hurting. Lord, Sister Smith is looking for work. Very plain, straightforward language. And just say, Lord, please pay attention, help. That is a valid sort of prayer to have. And it's a valid sort of prayer to offer to the Lord. One of the worst things that anybody can do in any relationship is to be afraid of being direct and to be afraid of sharing or to think that they have to get the words absolutely right. I mean, it's often the fact that somebody knows what's on your mind, but they may want you to say it. You look upset. What's going on? Best way to kill things is to say, oh, nothing, or never mind. Just go ahead. Call it a kumbaya prayer. And you can also share happiness and joy and hopefulness. Because those are things that are also in the soil around us that God puts there. And there are things that help us grow. You don't want to overlook opportunities to praise and simply say, thank you, Lord, for the sunshine. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for the replenishment of the soil. Thank you for the things that help people, ourselves included, to find peace, to bear fruit in acts of mercy and of justice, of forgiveness, of kindness, of creativity. That these things come from the Lord and are the sorts of fruits that He looks for. And when they're not there, give Him time to make sure that all that's needed to bring them about will be supplied. It's really a very straightforward kind of a parable Jesus told. But there's a lot to it. Thanks be to God for that. Amen.